Live on YouTube. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. How are you guys doing? I hope everybody's healthy and happy and surviving our crazy world. I think you guys probably are, or you wouldn't be here. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you would be. I'm not sure. Life is good as we know it. I hope we have a couple of things today we can talk about. Wet Collodion wise, it's a beautiful, sunny morning here on the mountain. The continual soiree of wonderful things happening. We have a lot going on as far as my personal life. If you look at the photos on Facebook, you'll see that we have our foundation in. Our house is completed. We just need to put it up, and we're good to go. So we're excited, and I hope we got a big storm coming. What's today? Saturday. We have a big storm starting tomorrow. 15 centimeters of snow. Sunday and Monday, the low is going to be around 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So you can do the math on the Celsius. It's pretty cold, but it's short-lived because we're back up into the 10 or 15 degrees Celsius by the middle of the week. So we're good to go. I hope everybody's doing well. Hello, Will and Jan from Norway. Will from Erie, PA. Good to see you guys. We'll get some people in that YouTube side. They're coming slowly but surely. Hey, Dale, good to see you, man. Yeah, that bunky status. It's coming along. Everything's coming along. So I cleared a pad the other day, a 50-foot wide by 70-foot long, what we call our outbuilding pad. That's where I'm going to put the studio, storage, greenhouse, chickens, all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, we're coming along. We're rolling along. So yeah, keep on rolling. That's it. And there's Tom from Texas, I believe. Good deal. So welcome again. Thanks for everybody for coming in and joining everyone else today and me this morning, especially for this little chat about Wet Plate Collodion. I think we can cover some good stuff today. I told you via the ad a couple of things we're going to talk about. Drying dead, varnishing in particular, some equipment. There was a couple of questions I got this week about why are my plates constantly drying dead? These things seem to come in waves. I don't know. Maybe it's people post and then they start saying, hey, I had that problem. Maybe I'll ask somebody, whatever. But drying dead, how I like to varnish, what I like to varnish with, all that kind of good stuff. I want to talk a little bit about exposure. There's another kind of thing happening with people not quite understanding. I mean, I know it's exciting when you pour your plate and you expose and you get something that shows up on the plate. It's awesome, right? But at the end of the day, what we want to do is try to dial you in to the proper exposures, the proper techniques, the proper all that kind of good stuff so you can maximize this. And I know for a lot of people just starting out, it's like I had something show up on my plate and I'm happy kind of thing. I get that. I do. But as you go along, you're going to want to move from that kind of milk situation to the meat situation. So we wean you off the milk and get you into the meat. And that's what we're going to try to talk about here today a little bit, is the meat portion of that. So some varnishing, some exposure. And then I want to talk a little bit about putting together a body of work. I just had somebody out of Los Angeles contact me. And I won't say who it is because I haven't finalized anything with him yet, but they're doing a documentary on Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States. And they want to commission some wet plate work. And so I'm in conversation with them and just getting chatting a little bit, talking about how people work. Why are you in Wet Plate Collodion? What are you doing? Do you like the equipment? A chemist? Do you like the process? Are you an artist? Are you making work? Are you a commercial photographer that's found a little niche on the side you can make some extra money with? What is it that you're doing with that? And the conversation led on to making bodies of work. So when I get inquiries like this, whether it's Levi Strauss or somebody doing something on a commercial ad or a documentary film or a book, I've had quite a few books that I've sold imagery to for publication. And it's kind of unique in the wet plate world. I did it all the time in the film world, and I didn't ever really do much digital that way. And so it's kind of unique in the wet plate world to have that conversation steer from kind of the commercial side of things into the kind of the fine art. How do you work? Why are you working on this? Where are you doing this? And getting a chance to explain your position on building a body of work. I just posted a book about a week ago on Facebook. Really good. Let me pull that up. Just so I'm going to post it. I'm going to put it in here so you guys have a chance. I know not everybody. Facebook's one of those things. It's like a necessary evil in a way. I mean, it's great, but I don't sit and spend, twirl through that toilet paper for hours. And I know a lot of people don't. So I know if you've missed this, I just want to make sure you get this book if you're interested in this kind of thing. The bottom line is I'm going to talk a little bit about making and building a body of work, some of those kind of things that you might want to consider. Maybe share some of if you guys have bodies of work that you want to talk about, or ideas that you want to share, or ask questions or give comments about or on, please do that. Because at the end of the day, I think what's important, we're trying to put together a narrative with, photography is a great, one of the best ways, universally understood, right? We don't need to speak the language. We don't need to anything. It's a visual thing. And I think you'll find at the end of the day, you naturally gravitate toward wanting to put together a story. This book is called Attentional Engines, A Perceptual Theory of the Arts, Thinking Art, a book by William P. Seeley. I'm going to put that post. I'm going to post this URL. This guy is really amazing. When I heard him talk, it was like, for me, it was like, wow, this is a kindred spirit, so to speak. And his view, his philosophy on what art is, and what it is about, or what it should be about, I guess, a better way to say it. Did I put a link up there? I guess I didn't. Maybe that's why I didn't. Okay. Anyway, here's the comment, and then I'm going to put that broke it up into two pieces. Okay. I'm going to put the link up here as well, too. If you guys are into this kind of thing, I highly recommend you get this. Really informative, really insightful. I'll just put the Amazon link, I guess, if I can find it. Attentional Engines. William P. Seeley. But at the end of the day, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about putting together a body of work, or some of the methodologies that people use, that I use. Of course, they're not going to give me the link here. Let me find it. William P. Seeley, boom. I should have had this up. I just thought about it, though. You can't find that book on Amazon? Are you kidding me? Where did I get it from? Let's see. Brought up some Trump books. Isn't that funny? Attentional engines bring up Trump books on Amazon. That's hilarious. I'll just Google it. I think my connection, yeah, here we go. William P. Seeley proposes that artworks are attentional engines. Our understanding and appreciation of artwork is therefore carried in our perceptual experience of them. Attentional engines explore the pitfalls and potentials of this interdisciplinary strategy for understanding arts, or understanding art. So I finally found it here. Look inside. Kindle was $30. That's what it was. Kindle's $34 on that. Look inside. Okay, there we go. Here's the link. If you guys are interested in this, sorry that took me so long, but poking around there. You didn't mess the start. You're fine. Boy, that's a hell of a link there. Look at that thing. Anyway, I put it up there on the YouTube, and I'll come over here and put it in the private chat as well too. There's a link to it. So anyway, let's talk about varnishing first. Everybody at some point in time in Wet Plate Collodion runs in to either I'm melting my images, right? I pour my varnish on and my image dissolves, or I've got speckles, I got bumps, I got shite on my plate. It looks terrible, right? That's what they say. They say, oh my God, I did all this. I had this wonderful plate. I poured my varnish on it, either melted or dissolved, or I've got pits or crap all over in it. It's got matte finish on one side. It's all matted down on the streaky on one side, blah, blah, blah. So basically, I want to break down what's happening there. The first should be really easy to understand, varnishing problem. I don't care if you varnish with gum sanderac or if you varnish with shellac, right? Either one's fine. Both were very popular in the 19th century. I've preferred gum sanderac varnish all these years. It's treated me well. Yes, it does take a little bit to get dialed in. Some people like to spin the color out with a carbon, spin the carbon out, color out with carbon on a, what do we call those? It slips my name now. You know, the really fast swirly things. I can't remember the name of them. They like to spin the color out. Yeah, thank you, Dale. Thank you. And they like to take that yellow color out. Here's my philosophy on that. This has nothing to do with troubleshooting, but if you don't like the color that the collodion positive produces, the ambrotype or tintype, and you haven't exposed your image properly, you may have a darkening down. And darkening down just means this: you make an image, you have a plate, and when it's wet, that's when you judge the exposure, when it's wet. Theoretically, when you varnish that plate, after it dries, it'll brighten up about a stop or a stop and a half. They get quite bright. So if you're overexposed on your ambrotype, it's going to look extremely bright when it's dried. You're going to say, oh my God, what happened, right? But then when you heat it up and you varnish it, especially with a full gum varnish, a gum sanderac varnish, you get both the tonal range coming back, your darks will become dense again, you know, you'll have that contrast and tonal range again. But if you're underexposed, you're going to go too dark. You'll dry up light and it'll look like a good exposure. Then you pour the gum sanderac on and it goes, quote, dark. A lot of people have complained about this. This isn't a gum sanderac problem. This is a pilot error. This is an exposure error. And this is the other side of the exposure stuff I'm going to talk about in just a minute. Overexposing versus underexposing. So when you underexpose a positive plate, the image is dark, right? So when it dries up, you start to get actually what it is. It's the reflectivity of the grains of silver, the silver shining back at you. When it dries up, it has more luminance. It brightens, right? So it comes back at you a lot brighter. Then you pour that varnish on it, and it takes it down again, and you darken down, or you lose that brightness. People get upset about this. So what people have done is they spin the color out of that in a centrifuge with carbon, and it neutralizes that. It takes that yellow color out, and you have this kind of neutral varnish, this kind of or at least very light. So it doesn't have as bad as an effect on the plate, quote, bad on the plate. Rather than just exposing the plate right and varnishing properly, people try to get away with this. And I understand sometimes in the 19th century, a photographer would be making portraits in their studio, have the cloud come over or something during exposure, and it's a little bit underexposed, and it would dry up, and the client would see that and they say, oh, wow, you know, don't varnish it. I like it like that. So they'd put a piece of glass over it, tape it up, and give it to them. I've got a couple of those, actually. Because if the photographer were to varnish that, darken down a half a stop or a stop, and people don't like that. So underexposure and varnishing do not go together. That's the moral of this story. Now on to melting the image or dissolving the image when you pour the varnish on. This happens generally, not all the time, but generally when you have an oxidized or highly iodized collodion, meaning that it's an orange, dark orange going into red, or even a red color, meaning that nitrocellulose is broken down and the iodide has precipitated out into iodine. That's why it's a red color, right, as we go further down. So that increases your contrast and it slows your ISO. That's two things that happens with a highly iodized collodion, or orange, dark orange, red collodion. Now, when you use this collodion and you make photographs with it, you end up having to varnish. The photographs work fine as long as you have enough light or a fast enough lens or a combination of both. But then you take varnish and you've got 95% alcohol in that, 5% water, 95% ethanol, and you've got the resin, the gum, the sap dissolved in that, and you've got a plasticizer in that. Usually, 99.9% of the time, I hope you're using pure lavender oil, the oil from the actual bud of the lavender flower, the oil from the plant, let's say, not the artificial or imitation kind. And the plasticizer keeps that gum sanderac flexible. It keeps those little spider cracks and all that stuff out of it over time. But here's the culprit: highly iodized collodion, or fragile collodion, as if we want to say it that way. And you pour that alcohol on it, straight on, alcohol and gum sanderac, straight up. Sometimes that alcohol in the varnish is too strong for that weakened collodion. And I hate to use, that's pejorative. That's kind of making it sound bad. There's nothing bad about it. It's just you have to adjust for it if you want to use it. Sometimes when you pour that on, it'll go through and the collodion, the silver rides just on top and just underneath the collodion on the images. If you ever investigate and put under a microscope, look where your silver, your reduced silver layers are. They're right on top of the plate and right underneath the nitrocellulose or the collodion. And sometimes that alcohol can melt. You know what nitrocellulose is, right? It's cotton that's basically converted into a plastic form at this point. That alcohol is strong enough to melt that plastic away, and your silver slides off with that. So what is the solution to that? Well, you have to dial your varnish back a little bit. And this has nothing to do with what type of varnish you're using. If you have alcohol in your varnish, this is going to happen. You have to dial that back. And how do you dial that back? You add a little bit of distilled water to your varnish. And I recommend 10 drops for every 250 mils of varnish you have, and try another plate with the same collodion. With fresher collodion, you don't have to worry about this. It's strong enough that nitrocellulose won't take a dive on you that way. So that's the first problem with varnishing. My images, I just got one this week. My images are melting. What do I do? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, this is what you do. And so you have to experiment a little bit and add a little more distilled water to your varnish. That's all you have to do. And that'll resolve 99% of the time. That'll resolve the problem. Samuel says, quick question, I forgot. Can I use any plastic or PP measurement beaker for silver nitrate maintenance, or does it have to be glass? Just broke my glass beaker. We'll veer off here for just a second on Samuel's question. So when you're talking about silver nitrate, the absolute storage container is glass for me. Why is that? It's neutral. It doesn't off gas. It doesn't absorb. It doesn't do any of those things. When you say a plastic container, if you're using an old juice jug or an old something or another jug, I'd probably not do that. If you're using a distilled or deionized water jug, that'd be perfectly fine. I'm not a big fan of leaving silver nitrate and plastic in light. That can cause some stuff, let's say, to be absorbed into your silver nitrate. Sometimes these manufacturers, again, we're at the mercy of every product we pick up, and every chemical we put into contact with that product, we may or may not have poor results. So you're taking a gamble every time you put your silver nitrate into something other than glass. I store all of my silver nitrate in glass, whether large, small, whatever. Usually 1 liter containers, but glass is what I prefer. You can try that, Samuel, but just, you know, caveat import, buyer beware. Make sure you don't, you know, put it into some old, you know, plastic oil jug or something. You know what I'm saying? You get the point. Be forewarned is forearmed that way. So there it is. Varnish, dissolving image, melting image, reduce that alcohol, draw back that alcohol a little bit with some distilled water, temper that alcohol so it's not so aggressive on the plate, and you will be fine. Tom says, my Sandrack varnishing is fine, but no matter how much I drain or keep it tilted or drying over, I still get a faint flow back lines around 5 minutes. Okay, that's a good question, Tom. What he's talking about is a drip line. Everybody gets the drip lines, right? The drip lines are probably less prevalent in the summertime because of the heat and the flow of the varnish and all that kind of stuff, right? Honestly, drip lines are kind of an inevitable part, usually, of making plates. Now, you can get good enough, and this is how you do it. If you want to get rid of your drip line, it's kind of a non-issue. Even the old plates had drip lines, you know, all that good stuff. But here's how you do it. And the next thing I'm going to talk about here in varnishing is the equipment. If you're using, I have a Black & Decker oven that I use in knife making handles for knives. Actually, there's Kydex sheaths. I make sheaths, Kydex sheaths for knives with that Black & Decker oven. I also stabilize handle material and those kinds of things. But a few times I put plates in there, right? Either plates that just came out of the wash or varnishing plates. It works great, right? It's really terrific because you have this enclosed environment. You can control the temperature. You can kind of let it be. There's nothing coming down out of the, you know, wind blowing, fans going off, people walking by, whatever it is, raising that dust up, that kind of stuff. Humidity is controlled, heat's controlled. It's a great thing. It really is. But here's my problem with that. It's really difficult to do that when you're out in the field, to take an oven with you, right? And here we go back to my same rant as I'm always ranting about. If you got a great idea and it doesn't involve putting another piece of equipment in this process, I'm all ears, right? And I'm really big ears if you're going to take a piece of the equipment away and even do a better job with the process. Now you've really got my attention. But if you're adding another piece of equipment, especially one that's so difficult, you know, that's a studio operation. Have one in your studio, fine, if you've got the space. But eventually you're going to get out of that studio and you're going to be outside. Maybe year 1, maybe year 10, but sometime in that process, you're going to be outside. You just will. And that complicates things on varnishing plates. You can't take your Black & Decker oven out in the field. Or maybe you can. If you have a generator and you do all that, there's another piece of equipment there. You know, it just complicates everything. I use an alcohol lamp. I know people, oh my God, those are dangerous. You know, years ago, I'd always have to defend this. Oh, those are so dangerous. You're going to blow people up. I say, no, I bring people into workshops and I teach them safely how to use an alcohol lamp, right? A spirit lamp, a little one, like that big that I could put in my shirt pocket, right? Equipment wise, I can take that in the field. I've used it all the time. If I'm on site doing demos or if I'm doing something, I can varnish the plates there, blah, 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 all that stuff. So I personally use a lamp, a spirit lamp, and I would recommend, and it's an alcohol lamp. It doesn't really matter what fuel you use. In essence, some fuels burn hotter than others. I like to burn alcohol in my spirit lamp. Super hot, that little tiny flame stick, super, super hot. I can dry and varnish plates like that with that thing. So it's really convenient for me. It's not everybody's cup of tea or cup of meat, but it works well, and it doesn't have a huge overhead on it. Tom says, what does he say? Tom, I have a stabilizing oven as well. And when I tried it with varnishing, I apparently overheated and got orange peel bubbles. Yes, sir. I prefer the alcohol lamp as well. There you go. Yeah, my experience is similar, Tom. I'm assuming you're saying your stabilizing oven, like you're using cactus juice and stabilizing materials. Is that what you're saying? That's what I do. I find an old piece of wood out somewhere, or an old piece of walnut a friend's given me, and I cut it up into knife scales, is what they're called, for knife handles. I make knives. And I put it in this product called cactus juice. And I infuse it with the cactus juice. So I remove all the air out of the material and replace it with resin. And then I put those pieces in the oven and heat them up and stabilize that cactus juice. And that's what I end up. It's a hardened, waterproof material, no matter what the material is, wood-wise. So, yeah, Tom, okay, cool. Do you make knives, Tom? Are you a knife maker? Nice. Look at him. He's a kindred spirit. There you go. I make scales as well with cactus juice. Awesome. See, this is just great stuff. I love you guys. It's awesome. At the end of the day, I think we have a not a dilemma, but just a question to ask ourselves. Maybe it's a dilemma for you. It depends on how you work. There's a safety issue. People would argue, and it's fair, get the oven, you don't have the flames, you won't catch your plates on fire. Have I had people catch plates on fire? Yes, I have. Jeffrey, hello? I'm just teasing you. But this is what I do. If you come to a workshop, or if you came to a workshop, I'm not doing workshops anymore, but if you came to a workshop when I was doing workshops, 99% of the time, I will say, when it comes to the end of the day and you have 10 or 15 plates sitting there on the rack or racks, say it's time to varnish. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you, so I'm going to take a scrap plate, I'm going to pour varnish on it, and I'm going to catch it on fire over the alcohol lamp. And I'm going to show you that it's very difficult to see that alcohol burning. It burns so clean. You're not even going to know it's on fire until you see a little bit of blue show up there. And then what I do is I turn away from everything. I blow that alcohol out. And if you do it quick enough, you don't even have to revarnish. You can blow that out, be safe. You're not catching fires. I had one guy years ago in the studio in Denver. I got called into the dark room. I came out, and this dude had my entire table on fire. The tablecloth and everything. It's because he panicked. He had a whole plate, caught it on fire, panicked. I should have been out there. Maybe I shouldn't even be saying this, but it wasn't that as extreme as it sounded. But it tells you, yes, there is an element. And again, risk management. How are you comfortable? How much are you comfortable? What are the trade-offs? Risk management. That's what I'm saying. So if you don't like using an alcohol lamp, if you like the oven, if you like whatever you like to do, here's the point that I'm making coming to the next problem. This comes with all kinds of issues. Everything from orange peel surfaces to little bits and pieces of crap to drawing dead. I'm going to cover each one of those real quickly. Let's start with orange peeling. When you varnish a plate and you end up looking at it on an angle and you see little tiny pits or little tiny craters everywhere, that probably means it was high humidity, or you didn't get the water evaporated out of that plate quick enough. Usually it's external humidity. It's external. It's environmental humidity. Like you're working in a 70, 80, 90% humidity environment, and actual water in the air is getting down onto the plate before you can burn it off, so to speak. So let's talk about what's the heating a varnish plate, or heating a plate up, varnishing it, and then heating it some more. What's the purpose of that? When you pour the varnish on, you generally have 5% of that compound water, 95% ethanol, maybe 4% or 96%, depends on what you're using. I like 95% ethanol, 5% water. You have a plasticizer, lavender oil, and you have the sap or the resin, gum sandarac melted in that. The idea is you heat the plate up to accept the varnish. I even warm the varnish up. I use test tubes. I warm the varnish up over my spirit lamp. I just take the chill off of them. I put the varnish on, pour the varnish on the plate. I drain it. Then to Tom's question about drip lines, I wick those edges off. I try to tease all the varnish down that I can. I keep it tilted. I have a little technique that I show people how to do this. I keep it tilted so the gravity pulls that down. I wick that external excess varnish off on a paper towel, and then it tilted. I get it up high over the alcohol lamp, and I start heating it up. The heat, the idea with this is the quicker you can get the heat on that, and the faster you can get that 5% water evaporated out of that, the better shine, the better surface, the better everything you'll have. The trick is getting it heated up and then wicking that edge off if you don't want that drip line. I'd rather take the drip line and have a clean, glossy surface than have it dry kind of dead or kind of matte, or have problems with, there's all kinds of problems that can arise. Normally it's drying dead. When you leave water in that varnish on your plate, if you're not hot enough with your flame or your heat source, you will have that water dry that varnish to a matte finish. It's called, in the 19th century, they called it drying dead. Sometimes it's just streaks. Sometimes it's the entire plate. And sometimes you won't even recognize that it's dried dead a little bit until you have a proper plate that's not dried dead, that you actually got all the water, maybe in the summertime, right? And you compare those plates and you see the difference in them. It's amazing. It's actually amazing. So there are very subtle differences in how you approach to get that, evaporate that water out of that varnish as quickly as possible. And allowing, you've all seen gum sandrack and water. They do not like each other at all. They hate each other, and yet you're putting them together. So you've got to mitigate and you've got to compensate for that. Because if you don't, you end up with basically a flat, dead, dry, dead matte finish. Now, if you want the matte finish, you can do that. You can make the matte finish happen, no problem.
Quinn, can I just jump in here with a question?
Please, Dale.
You mentioned a few minutes back about changing the fuel source in your lamp.
Yeah.
With that in mind, how much are you having to change technique with drying the varnish after you apply it so it doesn't dry dead? In other words, one fuel heats hotter than another. Yeah. So do you have to change your technique, basically your speed of drying it?
Great question. Here's the thing that I've noticed. And I'll give you a great example of your question. So we moved out of our house in Denver, Aurora, and came up here to the mountains, and now we're on propane. We were on natural gas in the city. Propane burns a lot hotter than natural gas. And I already know this because I'm a blacksmith. I use a propane forge, so I know how hot propane burns. But that's the difference. You adjust personally, and it's a great question, because if you go, even I've even seen some fuel brands. Again, remember we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about companies making slight modest changes to their products, and then we buy them and our process doesn't work anymore, i.e., aluminum plates, nitric acid. There's been compounds over the years that the manufacturers changed slightly, probably to save money. I would like to say to improve quality, but I bet you it's to save money, and it affects us. So I've seen manufacturers change fuel sources and different materials, and they burn differently. That's why I've stayed consistently, not with grain alcohol, but with denatured alcohol. I burn in my spirit lamp. I just use that. It's clean. It doesn't put any black soot on the back of the plates. It's a consistent temperature. But if you do have problems with your plates drying dead, look at that heat source. See if there's anything that's changed. Go a little hotter. Don't go too hot. Like Tom said, you'll blister up and all that stuff. Yeah, you're going to melt that plastic, all that kind of good stuff. So play around, adjust accordingly. Just like Dale asked, you're going to have to, this is a personal process for you, right? I mean, this is something you need to learn what works best for you safely, effectively, and all that. But just pay attention to these little subtle things. No one ever talks about this stuff. It amazes me that if we want to have even a technical conversation, people don't talk about these kind of nuts and bolts kind of things. They always want to talk about the superficial stuff that's really super obvious, but the real hard problems are going to come with understanding every aspect of what your methodology. And Dale brought up a good point about changing fuels and equipment and things like that. You're just going to have to play around with it yourself. Just don't do this. I get so many emails. Well, I've had several emails. I tend to exaggerate there a little bit. I've had a lot of emails, relatively speaking, that say the effect like this. Hey, Quinn, I just watched your video on varnishing. And man, I'm sitting here in my room and I'm looking at I got 50 unvarnished plates sitting around on my shelf because I'm so afraid to varnish them because I'll ruin them. And I know I've got that email at least a half a dozen times over the years, right? So don't be afraid to varnish. Learn how to varnish. Learn the techniques that work for you. It's the final step in the process that's probably the most critical step if you have an image, because you're not going to have an image after X amount of time because you didn't varnish. Why do you varnish? What's the purpose of varnishing? Somebody on this panel can answer that, please. Answer that question for us.
Preserve the plates.
Well, real photographers make negatives, so there's the first clue.
Dale, you are the smartest ass I know. That's true. That is very true. You varnish the image because your image is made of silver, like the jewelry you wear, the coins we used to have, silver, metallic silver. What happens to metallic silver when you're in a polluted or an industrial area, let's say, with high pollution in the air or contaminants in the air? Those sulfides will hook on to that silver on your plate and change that compound from metallic silver into silver sulfide. Guess what color silver sulfide is? Black. Just like your grandma's silverware, just like the tarnished stuff you used to. I'm old, right? So I used to do this with my grandma's silverware. Get the tarnish out and clean it up for the holiday and take all that silver sulfide off of it because it's not varnished. So just keep in mind that if you don't varnish your plates, and maybe you live in the country, maybe you live in the mountains like I do, I could probably leave a plate up here for 5 years and it probably would have very little effect. Maybe not. I don't know. I haven't done it. But if you live in a city or you live near an industrial area or you have any kind of pollution in the air, I guarantee you, your plates are not going to survive that environment very long. They just won't. They'll start to diminish. They'll start getting kind of flat first, and then they'll start getting these kind of weird colored halo rings around the edges, and then you'll see it. It'll just progress on and on and on. If I had my stuff, I'd show you a silver sulfide plate right now. I just don't have access to my stuff right now, but I'll do it someday and show you. So that's why you want to varnish your plates. I don't care what kind of varnish you use, a modern acrylic, a shellac, a gum sander. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Whatever you prefer, make sure you cover that silver, because eventually it's going to interact with your environment wherever you're at. So really important.
Quinn, before I mute myself here, or you do, a quick question with respect to environment. I know you don't have to deal with this where you live, as fortunate as you are, but when you're working with humidity running in the anywhere from 60 to 85% on a regular basis, obviously we've got to get that humidity off the plate before we varnish, so you're heating it up. What's the risk of overheat? Can you overheat? Where's the magic line, or do you know if there is a magic line between how long it would take between the heat of the plate to eliminate that varnish, or sorry, that moisture off, that humidity off the plate before you pour the varnish? And I know that's a very ambiguous question, but
no, it's not. No, that's a great question.
once that heat starts to lower back down before you varnish, that humidity is also, we don't see it, but it's happening, and it's one of the big challenges in this type of an environment to hit that magic point where your plate no longer has humidity invisible to the eye sitting on the plate, but before you get the varnish on it, you want to keep that there. So is there a some kind of a formula where one can play around with? Is it maybe trying to get some of the water out of the alcohol in the varnish, or is it strictly a heat process?
You're on. You ask great questions, Dale. I appreciate that. No, that is not ambiguous at all. In fact, I should have led into that with this conversation, because here's the thing. Let's go back to the primary literature to answer part of your question. The primary literature, or the literature from the 19th century, which is mostly good. It's not all good. Just like today, it's the same thing. We're all human, right? It's really good information. And the old literature says that you should preheat that plate to what they call blood warm. And if we say blood warm, most of us have 98-degree Fahrenheit blood or body temperature. I say that's too low. And now you're right. I don't have to deal with the humidity up here. Although yesterday it was 100% humidity here, believe it or not. We were all fought. We had I don't know. It doesn't matter. It was 100% humidity. But I lived in Germany at sea level, high, similar to what you're talking about. I've been in China, very humid areas, right? So the old literature says you want to heat that plate blood warm. I say you go higher than that. I say you go around 40 degrees Celsius, 45 even. In fact, you make a very good point. When you pull that heat source off the flame or out of the oven or whatever your source is, and if you can hold it on the back of your hand, it's too cold. It's too cold. And why I overcompensate there is if you can only take the chill off your varnish. And that's another thing. If people use great big varnish bottles, that varnish is cold. You can't get that heat off. So now you're pouring cold varnish. Like you said, it drops the temperature immediately. Now you've got the problem back right at your doorstep. So over the years, I've gone to test tubes, which I can heat up the varnish quite well in that test tube. High heat, a chemical, chemistry labware, so I can heat that thing up good. And I probably get that varnish in the 30 to 35 degree range, or 30 degree range, high 80 degree Fahrenheit, low 90 Fahrenheit. And my plate is maybe 110, 120 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. So by the time I put both of those together, yes, it's dropping the temperature of the plate. I can still barely hold the plate. I pour that on and the temperature drops enough where I can stabilize the plate, and it's still warm enough that I can get it over, let it flow off, drip it off, and then get it back over the flame. It is, to answer your question, make sure you can barely hold the plate is that level. And you say, well, everybody's a little different. That's the best that I can do for that. As far as where's that gauge? Can you overheat? Yes, you can. And this is what happens when you overheat. You don't damage the image, but has anyone ever had this happen? You take a plate, and it doesn't, usually glass will break on you, especially if it's cold outside. If you get it too hot, it'll just shatter. But a metal plate or an aluminum plate, have you ever heated that up and you've been distracted or something? You really overheated it, maybe 120 Fahrenheit, 50 Celsius, 48 Celsius, something in there. And you pour your varnish on, and it goes all wiggly and cracky and weird. It doesn't pool out like a circle. It gets all strange and squiggly. That means your plate is too hot. And now you're going to have another problem. You're not going to get a good varnish covering on that. You want the varnish to pool in the center of the plate, and then guide it around and let it soak in, drain it, and then wick it off and get it over the flame. And this is one of those things that you just have to do personally to find your methodology, because it's just too difficult to put exact numbers on it. I'm just giving you a ballpark, but it's a great question. It's something to delve into and experiment. I know a lot of you guys have, and gals have, many junk plates that you could experiment with. And if you've taken your notes, you know what kind of collodion you made with those plates. You can look back in your log and see, oh, this is plate number 237. That was made with a highly iodized or an orange collodion on this date, and it's been sitting here for this long. If you have a lot of junk plates that you can experiment with, overheat, underheat, see what happens in your environment with your methodology, and then take some of these guidelines and figure out what works for you. Because at the end of the day, just like everything else in this process, I can give you some guides. I can give you some stuff that's worked for me really well over the years, but those may not work for you identically that way. So you may have to wiggle around and find a couple of other methods. But these are general guidelines. And I want everybody to know that's listening here or watching, when I come on these things, I am not speaking gospel. I do not have the market on this thing. I've been working in it a long time. Yes, I have experience, but these are only suggestions. You're going to have to figure out what works for you in your environment and your workflow, your methodology of how you do this stuff. So just keep that in mind. I'm not trying to make comments about this is the way you do it and you do not do it any other way. No, if it's unsafe, I'll tell you don't do it that way. But if it gets you there, if it gets you home and gets you the image you want, it's a good way to do it, and it's safe. It's a good way to do it. So,
thank you.
Absolutely. God, great questions, Dale. I love having you in here. You asked some really good questions. Jeffrey says, a question, Quinn, when varnishing, I was getting a white circular line, pouring circle. Is this due to not enough heat or too much? Open my book up to page 99 and read about that white residue. Read about that white deposit. Read about where that comes from. People write varnishing off as this kind of, oh, I hate it, or just give me the modern stuff, that stinky stuff that takes 2 weeks to dry and smells like a chemical factory. I don't like. I guess I'm too used to heated lavender oil, but people write off varnishing too quickly. We talked about why it's important to do. I mean, you got to have it to save your image, unless you. Yes, you cannot varnish your. Let me answer this before I answer Jeffrey's question. Yes, you cannot varnish your image. Yeah, obviously, you can decide not to varnish your image. But if you do that and you don't want to lose it over the months or the years or even weeks, maybe sometimes, take a piece of glass, put it over and take some archival tape and seal that up. Don't let any oxygen get to it. And you will save your plate. But there's, again, now I got to cut another piece of glass, deburr it, clean it, get some acid-free tape. Now, what do I do with it, kind of thing? But there's the catch, right? More stuff, more things. Do it right the first time. You don't have all that addition. That circular line, let's do this. Hold on. I'm going to come over here. And I know some of you don't have my book, and that's okay. I wish you had it. I would like you to have it. Most of you do. But if you open my book up, I'm going to open my book up right now to page 99. I'll just read you this, because the guy that wrote this, his head was in the game when he was writing it. So I trust this more than me. I spent a little time trying to think about how to write. So here we go. I'm going to go to page 99. And not 991. I only have 230 pages in the book. 99. Page 99. There we go. So this is in chapter 8 in troubleshooting. And it says on the topic, it says, varnish dissolves or melts image or leaves white deposit varnishing. Dissolving images. If you're using old collodion, sometimes the varnish, actually it's the alcohol in the varnish, will dissolve the image when you pour it on the plate. The collodion would have to be very old, over 6 months usually, or mixed improperly with bad chemistry to give you this problem. Always process a test plate and check the collodion before you make any serious work. If the varnish doesn't dissolve the image, it tells you the collodion can withstand the alcohol and it's okay to use. White deposit. If the alcohol content is too high in the varnish, it can leave a white deposit on the plate. Be very careful when measuring the ingredients, and always make sure that all the gum sandarac is dissolved in the alcohol when mixing the solution. And then I have a resolution, the 10 drops, blah, blah, blah of distilled water. So Jeffrey, the answer is your alcohol content was high. Maybe, and I've seen this happen quite a bit, people become impatient melting the gum sandarac in the alcohol, and they leave quite a bit of the gum in the bottom of the jar or whatever. It should be in the solution, and it's not. So in effect, that raises your alcohol content, and that's where you'll get those white deposits. And they're very common. I've seen them quite a bit. People think it's something to do, what it is, it's high alcohol content interacting with the tree sap or the gum. So great question there, Jeffrey. That's a good one, because I know people have that question a lot. Israel, hi Quinn. Honestly, what are the advantages of use of gum Sanderac varnish when I use the Mucilago? This is a thick liquid extract from nopal. Okay, it's 100% free of substance. Disadvantage is that with water, it could dissolve in long exposure with water. It's interesting, Israel. I've never heard of that product. I don't know what that. I don't know. That's something I'm not. Is this something? Well, yeah, I got Google. Let's find out what this is real quick. Maybe he's talking about something I do know about, but just using a different. Slime mold in the due to canine vomit. Dog sick slime mold? Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Or nopal. Let's try nopal. Nopal is a common name for Spanish for, a cacti. Okay, there you go. Now we're getting somewhere. Yes, why not? Sure, why not? I don't know the archivability on that, Israel. Again, no market on that. I don't know what that is. It's free of substance. Only disadvantage is with water. It could dissolve in long exposure with water. Okay, that's interesting to know. You'll have to give us a little more information on that if you can. Jan says, I heat the plate good around 45, 50. Good. Yes, perfect, Jan. That's great. That if you read his comment, I heat the plate around 45, 50 C. Northwest coast of Norway, high humidity, obviously, of course. He said that before. I also heat the pouring bottle to around 30. Beautiful. That's my style. That's my methodology. If it works for you, do it. Be careful, of course. When you talk about heating, you got all that alcohol. Just, we're going to pretend everybody knows about safety here. You've read the SDS. You understand the compounds you're working with, all that stuff, because that's what a good professional does. They're safe about all this stuff. John says each tear of gum Sanderac contains no less than 384 bugs stuck in it. Filtering is fun. Yeah, right. You want to know a secret, John? I'm going to let you in on a big secret right now. This is how I mix my gum Sanderac. And Dale probably has even a better method, but I'm going to put mine out here. Here's my method. I usually make 800 mils, more or less at a time, a liter, right? Okay. So my recipe breaks down into like 60 grams of sap or gum, 400 mils of 414 of alcohol, and 40 mils of lavender, the plasticizer. So this is what I do. I know this is a week-long process for me. So I put the 120 grams of sap or gum Sanderac in a mason jar, and I pour half of the alcohol in there, about 400 and some milliliters of alcohol. And I shake it up. I get it going. I shake it up a little bit, and then I just set it to the side. And overnight, it melts all that gum down. And in the morning, I have all those 384 sticks and bugs sitting on the bottom of my mason jar. Now, what I do now, I haven't put the lavender oil in it yet. I put it on a store bottle or a stock bottle, right? A liter stock bottle. And I do my first filtering. And I filter only with, this is how I filter. Brown coffee filter, which is about 45 micron, which is quite small. Brown coffee filter, and inside that coffee filter, and only inside that coffee filter, not by itself, cotton rounds or cotton balls. You don't want to put those in your funnel without the coffee filter. Then you're going to get all those fibers from the cotton in there, which just adds more problems. Like John says, filtering is so fun. But one brown filter, an unbleached filter, couple of cotton pads, cotton rounds, And then I pour that quart, that 800 mils, after I filled it up with alcohol, I pour that 800 mils of varnish. The bottom's hard now. I pour it off right before it gets to the end and all those bugs go in. I just swish that back into the bottle. Now I've got that filtering into my stock bottle. Now I take my stock bottle and I sit it on my shelf for a week. All that material just drops right out of it. All that fine, dusty, fine stuff on the bottom gets hard. It's almost immovable. Sometimes I let them sit for 2 weeks or 10 days. Then I take my pipette and I stick my pipette down in my bottle. I pull the bulb and I decant that beautifully clean varnish off the top. I never use another filter. I only decant. I let it settle and decant. I never filter it. I only filter it that one time. Maybe twice, depends. But right in that time period, all that sediment will sit down and harden on the bottom of the stock bottle. I can pull it out with a pipette, and my varnish is absolutely clean. It's pristine, and I varnish actually very little.
You mentioned, Quinn, that I may do things a little bit differently. In fact, I do. It's on page 98, I think, of your book.
Cool.
And I think that's where it says, basically, you face the east bow 3 times and pray to the collodion gods that your varnish will be nice. I do pretty much the same thing. No, I look at varnish as being a 7 to a 10-day process. And to do the final test, and this is, I think, it works for me. I don't know if it works for everyone. I basically take my collodion, or my varnish in the pour bottle, and I swirl it around till I get that tornado going. And if you look at that tornado, you can actually see if there's any precipitate in there, and it will fly out. You can see it forming and flying out. If it's there, then it means you have to get it filtered, or again, as you say, let it settle down and draw it out with a pipette or some way decant it, as opposed to getting it on the collodion. Because a lot of times when we think it's dust or AGI on the plate, it's actually in the varnish itself. It's minuscule. You can't see it unless you actually do that little swirl. So that's my final test. That's what I do.
That's great. That's a good methodology too. Let me jump in here and say, when people have done everything right and their varnish is clean, and I get these emails quite often as well. My varnish is clean. I filtered it a gazillion times. I've done this, I've done that, and I'm still getting these speckles and bumps and stuff. As I look at my plate on the side, it's all nasty. Here's what I've learned over the years on that. If your varnish is clean, just like you just said, Dale, if that is in fact clean, and you don't see that particulate, or you don't see that material in there, or if you've let it decant and sit for a week or 10 days and you decant it off, and that, I know that's clean. That's clean. And you still get this crap on your plates. Here's what I've discovered where that comes from. Your environment's clean. I'm misting my environment down. There's no fans blowing. There are no cats running around, or dogs, or animal hair flopping around, all that kind of good stuff. Everything's right, and I'm still getting this, Quinn. What is happening here? Here's what I tell people. 2 things. Number 1, you can overdevelop your plate and not even see it. In other words, when we overdevelop, what we're doing is we're developing or reducing unexposed material, reducing the AGI to pure metallic silver where there's no exposure. So you get a thin veiling, or you get when it's hardcore, you can't even see your image until you take a cotton ball over it, right, and wipe it off, and then you see your image under there. Well, you ratchet that up 100 degrees, and so slight you can't even see it on the plate. You let your plate dry, everything looks fine, and you go to varnish, and you get all these little pieces of material. That, most of the time, is shit, pardon the English or French, is shit coming from the edge of the plate, or you've overexposed slightly and you have undeveloped image silver showing up into that product. That little dusty stuff, that shouldn't have been developed. That should have been fixed away with all the unexposed silver. So your plates aren't exactly clean, and that will show up. Varnish will bring all of your sins to the forefront, everything. It will show all your weaknesses, because the name of the game is you've got this hot alcohol-based tree sap that's perfectly clean, hitting this plate with debris on it, and debris you can't even see with your eye. So what's your solution? Quinn, if you can't see it, how do you know it's happening? Solution, not that I advise this a lot, but under the water, right after you fix your plate and you're washing it, take a cotton ball real gently and just go over the plate once or twice. Don't, just the weight of the wet cotton ball. That's all you're doing. Just to ensure those void areas, those shadow areas, all that stuff doesn't have any of that unexposed silver being developed. That's what will show up on your varnish plate. I guarantee it. And the edges, if you don't do the cotton ball, before you varnish, clean the edge off with your finger. At least clean those. That's where all that shit gathers, right? And then it's going to come right out into the middle of your plate. And you're never going to varnish it off. You're always going to have pits and bumps, and it's going to look like crap from the side. It's not going to look good. So keep that in mind. Overexposure is deadly, or overdevelopment is deadly, sorry. Overdevelopment for varnishing greatly affects it, and you will see that stuff pop up in your workflow. I've been having great luck with vacuum filtering and a final batch. Yes, I use that a long while, John, and guess what? I didn't want another piece of equipment in the process. So I'd rather let the bottle sit on the shelf and decant. Yes, I have a pipette. You say, wait a minute, you said no more equipment. The pipette is a standard workflow. I pipette, no problem. I do have a vacuum and some little, those little round, what are they, 10 micron filters or whatever. Work great. I mean, it works great. But again, just another kind of piece. I know a lot of us don't plan and work things out logistically to have all this chemistry ready to go. But I've been kind of meticulous and kind of fastidious about it, I guess. Preparing my chemistry in advance, knowing when this will be ready, knowing when I decant my varnish, knowing when my collodion's ripe, knowing all that stuff. So I kind of plan that out. But if you don't, there are many methods to do it. And that vacuum system, that vacuum filtering that John's talking about works great. Let's see. Oh, Tom says, I build from kits but have reground some blades. Cool. Well, wonderful, Tom. I'm glad to have a kindred spirit there. Tom says, is denatured alcohol in the spirit lamp safer than grain alcohol, or does it matter? No, it's just cheaper. It doesn't matter. It's just cheaper, right? Grain alcohols, you get at your big Home Depot or Lowe's or something, versus grain alcohol we get here in the States from liquor stores or class 6 stores or whatever. I use isopropyl. Perfect. That's fine. No problem. Samuel says I use isopropyl. You're very welcome, Henrik. I'm happy you like it. So there's kind of drying dead, crap on my plate, varnishing issues, right? And we're not talking about the type of varnish. It really doesn't matter, right? Shellac, modern acrylic, gum sandarac, whatever floats your boat, whatever you like to use it. Just make sure you do it safely and it works for you. Theoretically, a good varnish plate will be like glass. No, you can turn it to the side in the bright light. It'll just be like glass. Really brilliant, clean, and if you're really lucky, you won't even have a drip line. But if you have a drip line, that's fine too. I don't mind drip lines. I think they're kind of part of all of that. But if you can get rid of them, get rid of them. Why not? So I want to briefly go on to exposure and talk a little bit about this. I see images online all the time, or people send them to me too. And people are just constantly overexposing their positives in this process. And I don't know why. If people would just dial back a little bit, some of the images that I've seen would be just wonderful photographs, but they're just too much light. And I get it. If you're just starting out, you think you need to really pump that light out there. And a lot of times you do, if you don't have a fast lens or, depending on the light. But the one thing I wanted to say about exposure, and if you're listening to this and you're not watching it, or if you're watching it incognito and you don't want me to see that you're watching it, take this, and I've gotten those emails too, but take this as a little piece of advice, even if you don't ever inquire or ask me about it. those of you that are making these images and posting them online and they're overexposed, dial them back like a quarter or a third of a stop or a half of a stop and see what happens. Just dial it back. Don't be afraid to cut the exposure. Everybody's talking about increasing exposure and adding more light and getting a faster lens. Try it the other way. If you're making these bright ambrotypes, dial them back a little. Man, you will have such a different experience with the process. And obviously, the end result of the image is going to be much, much better. I go back every time I'm on this live show. I constantly say, you are not exploiting all the potential of this process if you overexpose positives. You're leaving 90% out of what this process can give you if you overexpose by a half a stop. You've lost all that beauty, that richness, that 3-dimension, that color, that thing that just makes us go, oh, you just, your blood, you just get goosebumps looking at some of these sometimes. If you dial those exposures back a little bit, you'll be surprised at what you get, what your end result is. And I know it may seem counterintuitive, but, and here's the thing. Quinn, look at the 19th century photographs. They're all bright kind of thing, right? Well, in the 19th century, they were commercial photographers, basically, trying to make a living making photographs. And a lot of times, if they had women or family come in and sit for a portrait, and the woman was a little older or whatever, everybody was outside back in the day working hard. They didn't look great even at 35 or 40. So they'd overexpose and blow these wrinkles out a little bit, right? That was the idea, to overexpose, make the face bright. And I'd even hypothesize to say that this is a carryover from paintings. And if you look at paintings all the way back through, you'll see how they treated, most of the time, how the painters treated faces. They were very bright. They were very, angelic. That was kind of the thing. So photographers they tried to mimic some of these styles of painting, because that's what, there was painting. You got your portrait painted if you were very wealthy or popular or famous or whatever. And then photography came along and you paid 10 cents to have your photograph made. They tried to make that congruent and go through the line of like, this is as good as the painting kind of thing. So keep that in mind. Overexposure kills your image. A good image overexposed, just like in traditional film or digital or anything, unless you're trying to do that for some specific reason. And I'm not saying you wouldn't be doing that. If you're trying to make a full-on baseline, nice exposure, dial that back. Dial that exposure back. Very, very few people post anymore underexposed images. Why? Because everybody can tell they're underexposed. They post overexposed images because they're still acceptable, right? So we need to kind of dial that in and try to help. I wish people, and I guess I don't do this, but I'm open to it. I guess people that post photographs on social media anywhere, sometimes they'll ask, hey, give me some feedback, right? But a lot of times they'll just post them and they won't say anything. And I'm not going to jump in and say, hey, that's a well-composed, interesting photograph, but if you dialed that exposure back a half a stop, you'd be surprised at what it would look like. It would look like a whole different photograph. I don't want to jump in there and offer that unless people are asking. So that's why we opened this forum up so if people want to come in and show their photographs, I know you guys are open to get feedback. That's a great thing to do. This is a good environment to do it, to talk about constructively, not to be mean and say, we're better than you and you're better than, whatever. We just want to help people get dialed in if they're not dialed in. So that's what we kind of say. If you want to show some photographs here, please do. So the last thing, that's all I really had about exposure. Just kind of reiterate that. The last thing I want to talk about is building a body of work, and this sprung off the conversation I had about this inquiry about this Abraham Lincoln documentary, and that's been a couple of days. I haven't heard back from them, so I'm not really sure what they're looking for. They just said they wanted to commission some work, and then we got and then I got on this topic of a body of work. Why do people work in wet plate? Are you a commercial photographer? Do you teach? Do you are you a technical person that loves process and gear and all that stuff? There's many reasons to be in this process. Mine is specifically to make photographs for stories, to tell stories, right? And if you look at Attentional Engines, that book that I just posted, Seeley goes into great detail. In fact, I wished I would have written that book, for the fact that he goes into great detail about his philosophy on art and what art should do and how to build or make a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. I often say this: we as photographers, as artists, get away with murder. We absolutely get away with murder, because can you imagine if I got on here and I picked up a guitar and I just started banging and put my fingers somewhere on the fret, or got a horn, or tried to write prose, or tried to write a book, or a playwright or a movie, and it didn't have a structure to it? You get away with murder as a photographer, man. You can go out and make a photograph of a dead skunk. Oh my God, like, people go crazy, and it means nothing. But we as photographers get away with, a guy can go down to the local camera store and buy a digital camera, and next week he's shooting a wedding, or next week he's making photographs of the fall colors and posting them online. The lay person cannot tell the difference. They don't know the difference. It's our job to come in and put a body of work together that really means something to us. It can't just be something trending, or I've said this before, all this COVID stuff going, okay, I guess, if that's really if that's really what it's all about. But I think it just kind of gets some traction and what's timely. But if you're really putting a body of work together that your heart and your head is into, and you're authentic about it, people are going to know. People will recognize that immediately. And if you want to engage people, and just like anything else, you turn on a song, or an artist making music, and you may not like that song, but that song has all the components generally of what a song should be consumable. You should be able to consume that song and not have to wonder what it is, or is that a guitar, or why did they do that, or is that a word? You don't just string a bunch of words together and say, here's a poem. No, there's a little bit of structure that goes to that, right? And we just get away with so much that I feel like we should maybe take a moratorium, take a break from making photographs, and step back for a second and kind of reevaluate why we're doing what we're doing. And a lot of times you'll come back around to, well, I'm not telling a story. I'm just making these random images. And I see very famous artists that will just blatantly say, I don't know what I'm doing. I just make this shit, and they buy it. They eat it up. It sells in galleries. It does, it has nothing to do with anything, and they get away with it, right? They do. But we're not famous. We want to tell a story. I bet you every single person listening to this right now, if you pulled that Socratic method, if you got into the Socrates mode and examined yourself and why you're working in photography, specifically even this process, I bet you if you start examining and really, really thinking about and meditating on and really contemplating, asking those hard questions, I bet you really what you're wanting to do is tell a story. You just don't know what story. You don't feel like you know what story to tell. You don't know that it's in you, but it is. It just, you need help, and you need these kinds of groups, these kinds of conversations to start thinking and bring that out and realize it. And you'll know right off the bat if it's something authentic to you, that work will come. It may not be easy, but the work will come. So putting a body of work together is more like telling a story. It's more like finding something that you're truly, truly bothered by, really in love with, questioning, and then the ancillary stuff, you can tie in the historical component to it. You can tie in other disciplines, other human behaviors, and pretty soon you have this well-rounded, question of a body of work. A body of work to me should ask questions. It shouldn't really answer them, because those big questions we don't have answers to. We just want to put them out there and have art as a catalyst to have these conversations. Those are the only ways you can have the conversation, is if you put that structure together and offer it to the public. And it's got to make sense. It can't be a bunch of artsy fartsy BS. Like I've talked many times, people come, this is my ephemeral state of mind. You know, they get all squirmy, and they use these big 15 euro words, and they talk about, you know, their feelings and their this and their that. And really that's okay. But if it's your feelings, I can't challenge that. I can't say you don't feel that way, right? I want something to grab onto and have a conversation with. Said, this makes me feel lusciously gray. Great, makes you feel lusciously gray. There's no conversation to be had then. But if you put a body of work out that questions or challenges, or says something like, what about this? What about, you know, here are some questions to consider around this body of work. This is why I made the work. This is the reason this work exists. And hopefully that opens up a conversation. And that's what art should do. And if you read Attentional Engines, you're going to find that Seeley specifically says that art, in essence, should be socially active, should engage people, should ask questions, should put that stuff out there for people to consume. Nothing against beauty, nothing against, I just did it because I want to. That's all fine. Make that stuff. But at the end of the day, the work, I think, that's going to be important for humanity, and if you want to try to make a little bit of a difference, putting work together that you can offer up a statement for and challenge people with questions, I think that's good. Graham says, how can we share our work? Post URL. Yes, give us, not collodion related. I have been start with the Rollins project. Graham, put it up, man. Put a URL in here. I'll put it up on there. We'll share that. Graham, Mr. Lees wants to share some work. I believe he's in the UK, if I'm not mistaken. If he posts a link here, we'll look at some of Graham's work. Private chat. Let's see. I built many wood cameras. Oh, John says Quinn doesn't get much new music out there in high. No, I don't. In fact, I don't listen to radio. I don't watch TV, you know, ABC, NBC. I don't watch it. I don't do any of that stuff. I'm isolated. Pretty soon I won't even know. Maybe I won't even have a cell phone eventually. I don't know. No, over there at our property, we don't have a cell signal. We can't get phone call. We're on top of a mountain in a high meadow, and there's no cell reception. There's no internet. There's no nothing. So if I disappear, you guys, this is my testimony. You guys know why I disappeared. Israel said, I built many wood cameras, but I want to try plastic, but I don't know what kind of varnish I have to do over plastic to support silver. Do you know how I can protect my body plastic from silver nitrate? Israel, you wouldn't even have to worry about that. Silver is not responsive to plastic. Plastic's great. In fact, we make what I call acrylotypes on black plastic or clear plastic sheets. So perfect material you wouldn't even have to protect it, which is great. Graham's in South Africa. I'm sorry. Send us a link, brother. Send us a link. Let's look at some of that Rollins process. We're excited to see this, man. I know John likes Rollins. I know Tim, have you done any Rollins? I don't think you've done any Rollins, have you? Yeah, good. Awesome. We all love pigment prints. Let's put it that way. Let's see if he sends me let's see. Is he going to send a link over, brother? Chopper. Maybe another time. It'd be interesting ways to protect and save glass negatives from damage. Wow. Yeah. We should ask Roger Watkins about that. and all those old boys that pulled those mules around the West out here, breaking all those huge glass plates. What a tragedy, right? We can talk about that another time. If Graham will get us a link here. Where's your link, brother? Where's your link? I'm looking for it. The way just while we're waiting on Graham, the way I preserve my glass negatives is I make boxes for them, wooden boxes, and I put slots in them, and I varnish them, print them, and then I put them in the box and I store them. That's really, honestly, you could put them in sleeves, but once you start stacking them and you have weather changes and things and whatever varnish is on there, we go back to that again, you could peel those apart. It could be an absolute mess. Always stack, never pressure, always put them in standing, never stack them. No matter what they're in, they will get out. No, not showing, Graham. Can you post it right here? Yeah, it says, if you play around with the Sabatier effect, solarization of the negative ambrotype. By accident, I have, Jan. What's that, Dale?
Just to add on the storage, it only works on 4x5. One way that's very inexpensive and quite effective is the old CD jewel cases. Take the paper out, and the 4x5 will actually fit in the old ones, which tend to be the thicker ones, not the micro or the thin ones, but the older ones that don't have the round spindle in the middle. The 4x5 will fit right in those perfectly. You can sometimes find them on eBay. Now, whether the plastic or not affects the archival stability, who knows? But if I'm not either, quite frankly, it'll live long. Plastic in landfill sites will be around a lot longer than we will. So I don't. Yeah, exactly. You know, if people do have some issue, then it's very simple. Take a piece of acid-free paper, put that on the bottom of the jewel case, then put your plate on, emulsion side up on top of that, because you now have the air barrier. And as well, that jewel case has a gap, so it allows the air to flow through it, which doesn't.
That's really good, because that plastic in certain
so
environmental conditions can off-gas a little bit too. So that's really good. It's not just about the contact; it's about off-gassing in a sealed environment. So yeah, that's worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let's see.
Oh, okay, it's fine.
Free.
What are you charging, and what's my
royalties? All of this
are
advice
welcome.
is worth the price of admission, which is free. So there you go.
You need a new agent, brother.
I really need. Didn't realize negatives were varnished. Absolutely, Chopper. If negatives aren't varnished, here's the thing: positives are always varnished, right? Because we have that silver sulfide problem. And on top of that, you don't really handle positives. You usually frame them, put them on your wall, whatever, store them. Negatives absolutely have to be varnished, simply for the fact you're handling them. You're putting them on paper. You're moving. You're doing different prints. Those. I mean, even beyond the sulfide question or the tarnishing, if you will, those negatives are handled, and you know how fragile that emulsion or surface is on there. I'm looking for Graham's URL, and for the life of me, Graham, send it along, brother. Where are you? Maybe it's on he just friended me on Facebook. Let me go over here and see if he's got a URL up here. Let's see. No, he doesn't. Graham, you're going to have to send that over chat-wise here. Not allowing me to post in chat. Oh, so okay. You know what? It's 11:30, guys. Let's do this next week. Graham, there's a couple others that emailed me. Come in next week. Send me your links or email me at wetplate@gmail.com or quinn@studioq.com. I don't care, either one. And let me get those Oh, wait a minute. Here it is. Sorry. He got it. He sent it to me via Messenger here. You heard that ding, ding. Here it is. Well, great. Let's do this. I'm going to put your website up. So Graham wants some feedback. Let's give him some feedback. Let's start here. I'm going to pull this up and see if I can First attempts, lots to correct and work on. Feedback welcome. Yepo, X-ray 45. Perfect. Okay, here we go. Share screen. Application window, Chrome tab. I'm on Chrome. There it is, Rollins 2410Q. Perfect. All right, can everybody see that? Yeah, you can. Okay, I'll scroll through the page here. So this is Graham's work. For those of you that don't know what the Rollins oil printing process is, you can either go to my YouTube channel or I've got a whole bunch up there you can look at. Rollins oil printing process is a what's called a pigment process. It is, he says these are on Yepo paper, which is basically a plastic material. You take I use an 8% solution of photo bloom gelatin, dissolve it, I square it off, pour it on the Yepo or any kind of paper I want to make the print on, or glass, that's my kind of thing, or the glass oil prints. Let that dry, then cover it with dichromate to sensitize it. Let that dry, put the negative on, expose it to the sun or to a light bank, and pull the paper off and wash the dichromate out. That'll swell. The gelatin hardens where the shadows are and stays soft and swellable where the highlights are. So the gelatin swells where it's the highlights and stays flat where the shadows are. Then you take an ink and you either roll or brush a lithograph ink over it. Think of water and oil. The highlights repel the ink and leave the white paper or clear or whatever paper you have behind there. And the blacks or the shadows absorb or take on the ink and appear as shadows. That's what this process is. So what do you guys think? This is oil print attempt 1 negative, negative move during inspection. Oh, it came out of register is what he's saying. Very, very Caravaggio. Look at that one, huh? You guys know who Caravaggio is? The painter, one of my favorite painters. This whole yin and yang. I sometimes I like to photograph like that. Sometimes. Here it is. There you go. There's a print, a dichromated. This just came out of the print frame or the contact frame. This is the dichromated gelatin. His negative was exposed on here, and this is what it looks like when you pull it out of the contact frame. That's where you have to wash all that dichromate out of it in the water. What is this one? X-ray negative. Oh, that's really cool, Graham. You used X-ray film, made the negatives, and then you did Yepo Rollins printing. Very good. What do you guys think about this? Any comments?
I really like it a lot. I think it's a good job. I think it's really good.
What do you like about it, Tim?
Well, technically, they did a really good job. Okay, if you're talking about just the portrait look of it, I think it's a great portrait. You have lighting. You guys can't see my pointer, but you do have the previous image, the one just above that one, Quinn. Scroll up.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, on this one, you see there is some lighting on that dark side of the face. The dark side of the face is lit up on this one, and the next image, it's not. I like the look of this one better than the next one.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, in oil printing, and Quinn, you can comment on this better than I can, but in oil printing, if you wanted to add a little bit of density or texture to that bright side of the face, okay, to the highlight side of the face, if you wanted to add some tone to that, you can do that with a brush, a specific, not a roll brush, but a brush. And you can just gently tap some ink onto that part of the face and then blend it in with your roll brush or whatever. And Quinn, you can talk about if you wanted that bright side of the face to have a little bit more density or texture to it, you could add that with oil printing. And carbon printing, you're stuck with this. That's what you're going to get with carbon printing. Go ahead, Quinn. Sorry.
Very good point. No, that's great. Very good point. And what he's talking about, let's first go down to the negative here. You can see he's got a good negative, okay? Here he's in the high 1920 D max range here, and look at all this detail here. This is, you can even see a bits of her eye here. So what that tells me is, and I can even see it here on the contact print coming out of the contact printer. Here he's over inked that print. He's put too much ink on that paper. Here he hasn't put quite as much. But you're right, Tim. He could come back in here, swell this again, take his brush without ink on it, and take away some of this ink to show that detail. He does have a little bit of a problem here with the way this is lit. It kind of it's giving her a black eye here a little bit. That's why you see that so prominent there, and as well as here. So depending on what you're after, technically speaking, all he has to do is practice. He's got a good negative. It's just his inking technique. Inking takes a while to get down. Believe me, it is a difficult, when you first start, it's very difficult to dial this in. But you can take a very, very thin negative, a negative that's not nearly this good, and get a great oil print out of it. If your inking technique is right, it has to be right. You can't not have that information. So, not allowing me to post link. Oh yeah, that he already said that. So, anybody else got anything on that? That's interesting. I'm glad you got. Oh, here we go. Nice start. John says, nice start. Maybe the light, maybe the lighter areas over the dark is brushwork. Yes, you're right, Israel. That's exactly right. It is brushwork problem. But it's not, he's not that far off. Graham, if these are your first Rollins oil prints, you did a wonderful job. I get first-time oil prints sent to me, and sometimes I have a difficult time even telling what they are. I would say this. I like the portrait of a nice-looking young woman. I love this kind of stoic, stern look. I love that non-smiley. I like the portrait in and of itself. I would probably, like I say all the time, maybe illuminate a little more back here. But if I look at your negative down here, again, this just may be an inking problem. You do get quite thin on that shadow side over here, but just that separation, you'll find with oil printing, you will have a much better result with little higher especially in the beginning. If you're just starting out, do a little higher contrast images, so you get that swell really obvious. So when you pull it out of your dichromate wash, you can actually see the image. It's really exhilarating. I love it. I love looking at the relief. The relief, to me, if I could keep that, is sometimes, I don't know, it's as interesting as a photograph, technically speaking, right? But that relief is really important, because when you roll or you put ink on it, that's what's going to tell how much that resists and how much this takes, and those in-between spots where you want, you get that tonal range. That's your tonal range, right? Swollen whites and black shadows, and then everything in between. That's what you want. So good job starting out. It's a difficult process, but you are first inking attempt. Very great, Graham. Keep going, man. We love to see that. I want to see what people are doing out there. I want to encourage people to share their work and see what they're doing, and then keeping in mind, the whole body of work thing. Graham, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Why are you doing Rollins oil printing? Why have you selected this process to do or learn? Give him a sec. He's on YouTube. That's a little bit of a delay. We'll see what he says. I'm always curious. Rollins is as obscure process, as you can find, in the sense of, it's not like ambrotypes or tintypes or albumin printing or salt printing, right? Rollins is kind of a obscure, and this is not brome oil. This is a different. Brome oil uses silver gelatin, as we know. but an oil printing, when we say oil printing, it's a big umbrella. Rollins Oil Printing is specifically what he's talking about here, which is exciting. We'll let him respond to that if he wants to, but I'd be curious on why he selected that process. I know, for me, the Rollins oil process does two things for me, and I think I said this before, but I'm going to try to do this Red Mother Earth project up here in the mountains of Colorado, where the Ute Indians are, and these alien rock formations that were very sacred to them. Rollins Oil Printing does two things for me. Number one, I like to roll out or punch out on glass, not paper, so I do them on clear glass. So the substrate is fragile and unique, kind of like an ambrotype. Secondly, they're not photographs, they're prints. This has nothing to do with silver gelatin, right? There's gelatin and ink in this. This is not a photograph, this is a print. So it transcends photography, which is really sweet for me. With everything, with the advent of digital and everybody's a photographer and all that stuff, it gives you that kind of unique angle to talk about technically, right? Which is really important sometimes. If you want to get somebody's attention, sometimes you do have to go into the technical to get their interest and talk a little bit technical, and then you can go kind of in the conceptual. It's kind of like leading them into your work and getting them interested. So using the technical is a great tool that way. So transcending photography. And thirdly, I am a frustrated painter, I will admit. I always think when I get old, I'll paint. I think I'll paint. I think I might convert my photo studio over into a paint studio, and I may just paint, something like that. So these, between my vintage Petzval lenses and this ink, hand-rolled, hand-punched ink print, gives me a sense of a painterly sense, a handmade, even more so than the ambrotype. Complete, just like Tim said, complete, absolute control. If I have an a screw up on my negative, a big blotch, maybe I spit on it or something in the sky, and I do a Rollins oil print, I just let that gelatin swell and take an eraser or a razor blade in there and clip that little piece of gelatin out. I don't want it in there, right? And it's gone. So it's like the ultimate Photoshop, ultimate painterly quality, ultimate everything. And at the end of the day, for me, I want to come up with a process and a workflow that's as unique as the subject matter that I'm photographing, right? I want to separate this project, and I hope to do it in the next couple of years. I want to separate this project that's unique, specific to a location, with a very involved, intricate, personal approach that transcends photography. So in Ghost Dance, I did traditional wet collodion photography and negatives and prints, just like it would have been done in the 19th century, making photographs of Indians, Native Americans here. And now I'm going to go the other way. Now I'm going to say these aren't photographs, these are prints, gelatin and ink of these sacred, beautiful, sacred rock formations, and Red Mother Earth, as the Native Americans call it up here. That's my reason. Oh, Graham responded here. Let's put him up here. I like the look. Looks like a memory. Yes, absolutely. Very pictorialist. I've never had a look at a print before. Looking at these, it has a texture that I think I can add a story that is to be told. Good. Yeah. Here's the beautiful thing. Build on these little technical advances. If a material informs your interest, grab that, take that, put it in your quiver, run with it. Start writing your stuff out. Think about the process that really, really adds to the work, doesn't distract, but really supports. I've said this a million times. These processes and everything we do, the materials, need to support the work, not the other way around. We're not process photographers, right? We're storytellers. We're not journalists. We're not that, but we're artists. We're storytellers in our own right. We're telling our own story. We're telling people what's on our minds in the 21st century in this particular period of time, right? In these particular events. And maybe I just blew my cover for COVID, not wanting to do anything on COVID, but I just, yes.
Quinn, would you agree that oil printing really lends itself well to portraiture? if you go back to the turn of the century and Alfred Stieglitz and the whole pictorialist movement, you know, Stieglitz in his gallery, he didn't want sharp, crisp images, high resolution. And one day, he's in this pictorialist movement thing. And one day, this photographer wants to submit work to Alfred Stieglitz's gallery, and it was the typical f/64 crystal sharp and all this. And Stieglitz actually liked it. And guess who that person was? My understanding, it was Paul Strand. So, but Stieglitz wanted this pictorialist movement, wanted this Renaissance, you know, it looks like a painterly look. And I think oil printing really lends itself well to that painterly, artistic, Renaissance type of an image. And you can get some really, and another thing too is that back in the 1800s, they spent a lot of money, touch-up artists, almost double the price of a portrait, because the touch-up artist would go in and get rid of all the, you know, the wrinkles and blemishes and freckles and things. And so that's why Dallmeyer in 1866 came out with a soft focus lens, so that they could soften up the texture of the skin and make it look more painterly, and then eliminate the touch-up artists, eliminate at a huge cost. So oil printing and portraiture, I think, go really, really well together. Don't you, Quinn?
I do. I totally agree with everything you said. I think we touched on it just a little bit earlier, talking about exposure. They'd overexpose to compensate for these wrinkles and whatnot and everything. Absolutely. Here's the thing. If you look at the history of photography, and you just brought up a couple of good examples there, every period in photography. Now, we won't live through this. The people on this panel are here live, whatever, are watching this in the next few years. We won't live through this. But when we're dead and gone, and if the world survives, which I'm very, very doubtful, by the way, there will be a rebellion to whatever's going on here. Just like what Tim just mentioned. There's these actions and reactions, you know, the F-64 pictorialists, then the F-64 group. Then, you know, we move to this, from this shallow, painterly, artistic look to this sharp, front to back, crisp, clean, everything's perfect, right? Now we're in digital. This movement that you guys are involved with, you ladies and gentlemen, are involved with today, will be written in history. This will go down as something that happened in the turn of the 20th to the 21st century. People flocked to these processes. And I think the response will be for the digital movement, right? We had the digital movement come along. People became a little bit disillusioned, kind of like what Tim was just saying. And they wanted to go back to these handmade processes. So we always go back and forth, back and forth. So you go, yes, painterly. I love portraits in it. If they're done right, they're beautiful. They're difficult to do in oil, but they're beautiful. And like you said, it's kind of a throwback. Painting going into photography in the 19th century. That's what they knew. That's what they would try to achieve. That's what they built their equipment around. And then a lot of time, even the sharp stuff, right? You see all those. Look at the history of painting. Look, I know there's a ton there, but look at everything. Look at the movements through history briefly, and you'll see how the 19th century photographers were inspired by that. And why would a person come up with a process like this? Henry Peach Robinson, does that name ring a bell to anybody? If you look up pictorialism, really the key word here is pictorialism. And as I get a little bit older, I'm about 32 now. As I get a little bit older, I tend to get a little softer in my heart, right? I tend to be a little more empathetic, a little more compassionate, right? I don't want to hurt animals. I'm like a big baby sometimes that way, right? I feel more compassion, and it bleeds over into my artistic ventures too. I want it more poetic. I want it not so literal. I want it more not straying away from the story or the narrative at all. I just want it more painterly, more freedom, more control in the sense of how I want, you know, semiotics and semantics. Semiotics are visual play and semantics are word play. I want the semiotics to play with a narrative, and having that kind of pictorialist, soft, poetic visual. As I get older, I find that more attractive, right? I used to be in that like F64 group, and I used to be in that traditional photography group. I'm drifting away, and I have been for years. I'm drifting away from that quite a bit now, and I'm leaning more toward the more interpretive work in the semiotic realm, right? Not in the story. I'm not doing abstract stuff and saying I'm lusciously gray, anything like that. I'm just saying in that way. So, Dale, I'm sorry I missed you, brother. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate that so much. You always ask great questions, man. I appreciate that. John said, I started with Rollins because I was a fan of brome oil. Yes, but I didn't like my art being relied on commercial. But yep, there you go. So John started in the Rollins, went brome oil. If you don't know what brome oil is, it's pictorial too. It just uses a silver gelatin, like a modern photographic print to start with. And he says he didn't want to be captive to that market. I get it. A big part of my stuff is like, I take years to do stuff, right? I don't make work in 6 months. This is a long time, and you have something you've based an entire project on that you've been working on for 2 years, and then the product changes out there, and you can't get that paper anymore, or that film, or whatever. I mean, and I really, honestly, I don't know if you agree with this, John, but I really think the Rollins oil print has I don't want to say a very different look, but let's just say a different look from the brome oil prints. I think, and they should. I mean, they're two different kind of processes, right? It only makes sense. But so, thank you for sharing that, Mr. Lees from South Africa. Please join us again as you do more. Play with that brushwork. If you haven't seen my YouTube videos, go over there and check a couple out on the Rollins oil printing. I think I walked through the whole thing. I'm not sure, but check that out if you're interested. I really encourage people to experiment in pigment prints. Tim works in carbon. That's a little more difficult to do, of course, in the sense of not difficult to do, but Graham just talked about, I need to work on my inking. That's the equivalent of getting your dichromates and your contrast and everything right in carbon printing. They're just two different kinds of things. More people find carbon printing more difficult because of the restraints on it and the fine tuning of it versus the Rollins, where you have a little more liberty to work with it. So, Graham just joined us. Are you there, Graham? There he is. Hey, Henrik, thank you from Copenhagen. You're very welcome, sir. I appreciate you joining us today. I think we'll call that a day. I'm babbling for 2 hours. I can't believe it. Hello together. Greetings from Germany. Hello, Camera Misha. Dunkelkamera. Darkroom. I'd use, if I was German, I'd use Dunkelkamera as my username. Dunkelkamera, darkroom. Camera, right, is a room. People don't understand this. Camera is a room. Italian, you go to Italy, you want your camera, you want your room, right, in your hotel. So I just love I love semiotics as well, semantics as well as semiotics. I love this idea of camera as a room and a Dunkelkamera, a dark room. I love that. That's great. German is an interesting language. So guys, gals, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Honestly, I just love coming together like this and chatting with you guys. And thanks all over the world. If you're watching it now, if you're watching it later, it doesn't matter. I hope you get something out of it. Stay safe, stay healthy and happy. Send your images to me this week. We'll look at images all next week. If you send your stuff to me through the week, we'll look at those during the show. And I know, John, you have some. I think I still have some. You said you might want to, or that one. Send me some more if you can join us next week, man. I appreciate it. Stay safe, stay healthy, be well, and we'll see you next Saturday. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.